Something about this movie was weird. I liked it, but there's also some stuff that rubbed me the wrong way. Things that just leapt out to me as, I don't know, weird. Like, why did they start calling Grace a poor girl at some point? The harlot whore. Why were they suddenly pitying her? I don't get it. I mean, I don't think she was evil by any means, but what makes people think that she was just treated poorly? And then some of the churchgoers, they just felt very, like, I don't know, like caricatures of caricatures, like a bastardized version of some Adult Swim show. It felt less like satire and more like the liberal version of Fox News. And even again with some of Blanc's dialogue, it was like there was no subtlety here. I mean, I get that Blanc is supposed to be a drama queen. I love that about him, but like, come on. Meanwhile, Wix's character is extremely charismatic. His dialogue feels pretty grave and purposeful instead of like quippy or sarcastic like some of the rest of the cast. Wix and Martha both actually are pretty severe characters. It's completely at odds with how goofy some of these other characters are. But then the actual detective parts of this movie are really, really good. They're really fun. It gets really clever without being too obtuse, and it gives you plenty of hints and opportunities to try and figure out what's going on without being too esoteric. The detective parts of this movie are great, but then that's what confuses me about how strangely some of these characters are written. It's like an excellent detective story, but with a terrible drama comedy stuffed in there. Something about it just seems really disjointed. At the beginning even, it seemed like this movie was going to go in a totally different direction than what it did. I feel like this movie had an idea for Judd at the beginning, that Judd was a young priest that wanted to do good, but that he still had some growing to do. I feel like this movie had a very, very strong character focus originally, especially with that opening. Judd punched a dude for saying shit he didn't agree with, and then he's sent away to this church that's presumably out here in the boonies, partially as a punishment, but it seemed like it was also an opportunity for him to grow, or to redeem himself, or prove himself maybe. So Judd arrives to this place, and he's struggling with the father in charge here, Monsignor Wicks, who treats him like shit. Judd is constantly being antagonized in subtle ways. Judd and Wicks have totally different ideas on how to lead this church. Judd doesn't like the way that Wicks has been doing it. He feels like it's poisoning these people. So Judd, after what seems like forever of just being dicked around and yanked around by this priest, he finally goes and challenges Wicks about his ideals. And then Wicks challenges Judd's ideals. He says outright that Judd's version of love and forgiveness is basically bullshit. And then Judd gets into a literal physical conflict with Monsignor Wicks. I mean, he didn't start it, but he was provoked, and he succeeded at not punching Wicks, so good on him. But at the same time, Judd gives into his frustration and anger and promises to cut this man out of the church so that Judd can protect this church instead. In one way, it could be read that Judd is actually redeeming himself here by not punching Wicks, right? Like he's overcome that part of himself that would succumb to anger. But then he completely succumbs to Monsignor Wicks' ways of thinking, of making an enemy out of the people that don't follow your way of life, removing them to protect the world that you believe in. Judd gives up on dialogue and making peace. He gives up on forgiveness and love when it comes to Monsignor Wicks. He will do whatever it takes to save the church, and that means removing Wicks like he is a cancer. To me, it seemed like Judd completely fell into Wicks' trap. Judd stooped to his level. He fell low and failed to show that he had grown up at all from punching a guy out of anger. Wicks wanted to turn Judd combative. Wicks wanted to prove his point. Judd and Wicks have a serious conflict, and Judd's weaknesses are exposed and exploited by Wicks. Judd reverts back to his old ways. To me, this is Judd's true conflict. His own inability to forgive and his own inability to overcome his own hatred and his own anger. And that is great shit to me. I love this. Now we have established a conflict, an antagonist, someone who is at odds with our protagonist. Now we can let Judd grow into a true priest or whatever and redeem himself against this priest who is corrupted. Or, Judd can like fall into his own trappings. He doesn't necessarily have to grow forwards. He can grow backwards. But for me, I'm like, you know what? I can peg him. Judd's a good guy. He's gonna come out as the true hero in all this. So now is gonna be the time when true love of God and forgiveness and shit gets a chance to be tested and proven and whatever. Judd is gonna come out on top of this. I have full faith in him to get over this. But then Monsignor Wicks is killed. The conflict that Judd had with Wicks, it goes nowhere. Wicks ends up dying. He doesn't have to accept Monsignor Wicks anymore. He doesn't have to challenge Wicks's belief. He doesn't get a chance to change him or redeem him or even accept him. He doesn't get to cast Wicks out on his terms or anything. We don't get to see why Wicks is the way he is, or why the church respects his word, or why they fear it. For a detective movie to end its confession with words of forgiveness, it doesn't actually seem to care that much about forgiveness. Martha is given absolution of her guilt, which I do think is important. She deserved forgiveness. She did. It just doesn't make sense to me that nobody else does. Vera hates the boy she had to raise. She hates Sai. Sai is a selfish nuisance. The author dude is clearly under the impression that everyone hates him and is out to get him, and they're antagonizing him. And then the wheelchair lady is just easily taken advantage of, and nobody has to confront themselves or their mistakes except for Martha. She admits to a guilty conscience and how she succumbed to a desire for vengeance under the false premise that she was doing this for the church. She admitted to have committing a number of sins, lying, killing. She asks for forgiveness for her crimes against Judd, against Wicks and Nat and Samson, and then Grace for some reason? Why? Why is Judd asking her to forgive Grace? Because she has hate in her heart towards Grace? Alright, okay, fine, I get it. She does hate Grace. It seemed like she kind of tormented her. I get it. It's important to forgive the people you hate, but I don't know, maybe we should also be holding people who are terrible to some level of accountability. Wicks is outright cruel, and supposedly he takes after his father, Prentice. So why don't we get to examine that, or challenge the way that these guys enact their will onto their followers? Why don't we get to examine their so-called poison? Why just Martha? Anybody who does anything truly heinous in this movie just dies. They don't have a chance to redeem themselves. They don't get second chances. This movie removes any opportunity for real conflict that people have with their own prejudice. Martha, of all people, is the only one who faces her hatred by confessing to Judd, but she also just dies. Does forgiveness only come with death? Do you have to be on your deathbed begging for it, confessing to all of your crimes before you are allowed absolution? Kinda seems like it with this movie. Nobody else has to face their hatred or anger. Wicks, he's dead. Nat, he's dead. And Judd, our main boy, he doesn't have to confront Wicks or his own hatred either. Judd has to instead accept and forgive Martha, who was trying to frame him for a crime he didn't commit. But the thing is, Judd had no real attachment to her. They didn't share a bond. They didn't share any character moments. They weren't antagonizing each other. He didn't love her, but he also didn't hate her. Meanwhile, Judd was glad that Wicks had died, even if he felt guilty for thinking that. Wicks was the one that hated Judd. Wicks was the one that was tormenting Judd. Wicks was the one that was poisoning a church and in direct conflict with Judd's belief of love and forgiveness. Wicks was the one that he needed to confront. Wicks was the crux of his conflict, and that conflict is totally removed. Judd doesn't get a chance to confront Wicks again or to forgive Wicks. We don't get to do anything with Wicks. Instead, we get to sub in Martha, who he has no personal conflict with. He fully relates to her wanting to protect her church. Martha is more like a reflection of Judd. She becomes obsessed with the idea of protecting the church and doing whatever it takes for it. She's like a version of Judd that went about cutting out a cancer. She cut out the corruption of the church that was Wicks, the poison. No wonder Judd is able to forgive her. This person is someone he can profoundly empathize with because his intentions are mirrored. His guilt is mirrored in Martha. But isn't the whole point of love and forgiveness accepting people that you can't empathize with? This movie spends a lot of time trying to send a message of hate is wrong and to forgive yourself and to forgive others, to grow, to accept people. people, but nobody has to actually confront hatred of people that are hateful. It doesn't even bother dealing with someone that challenges that idea. It doesn't give anybody an opportunity to accept others that don't align with their ideals. It chickens out every time there's an opportunity to let someone actually confront themselves or someone else's hatred. Even the churchgoers, by the end of the movie, the wheelchair girl, she just moves on. And then Vera hates Sai, and Sai doesn't seem to give a shit about her. They have no relationship at all by the end of the movie. And then the author guy, he ends up publishing his book, I guess, but then he ends up attracting readers that he doesn't seem to respect or like. It's like the people that are hateable get their just desserts, and everyone else gets to move on without dealing with the consequences. This story just makes it seem like it's because the churchgoers are weak-willed and selfish, and that's why they were easily manipulated. And then it does nothing with that. I don't know, it just feels dumb. Like, what is the point about ending this story on a note of forgiveness if it doesn't give anyone a chance to actually forgive themselves or others? There's no actual confrontation here. There's no conflict to forgive. Nobody actually gets to redeem themselves. Nobody has to accept another person whose values they don't align with. Nobody has to acknowledge anybody's flaws. It's just also sanitized. I don't know. I love the way they walked through this whole murder, but I just don't understand why they couldn't treat these characters and the redemption of these two big guys with even like half an ounce of care. Whatever. I mean, it was better than the second movie, I guess.